In a quiet town, a chilling story began to unfold that would shake the community and shatter lives. As the investigation progressed, disturbing details began to emerge, revealing a brutal reality behind the seemingly inconspicuous facade. The evidence pointed to a horrifying conclusion, forcing those involved to confront a reality that was both disturbing and deeply tragic. As the police dug deeper, they discovered a horrifying truth that no one in the town could have imagined. What happened was not just a crime story, but a perversion of human nature and the destructive consequences of uncontrolled rage. Little Joshua was 3 years old when his mother, Krista, a 23-year-old single mother, moved the family to Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1992. Krista started working as a real estate rental agent at a residential complex almost immediately after the transfer. The things were going well. She soon got to know Joe, a 22-year-old employee at the building's fitness center. They became romantically involved, and Joe loved Joshua as his own son. After they started to live together as a normal American family, they eventually got married. Krista found herself pregnant after 3 years. A baby girl, Lauren, was born on December 5, 1996, 1 week before Krista's birthday and 1 month before Christmas. Krista always thought her daughter was the greatest present she could have received for Christmas. The family was incredibly unified and close-knit, and Lauren's birth strengthened their bond. Joe's father, Grandpa Dusty, loved his grandchildren dearly and treated them as if they were his own children. However, when Joe's employment was eliminated in 1999, the family found itself in financial jeopardy. The family survived on odd jobs for a while because he was unable to find work. They had to relocate to Phoenix, Arizona in order to obtain steady employment. The 1,500 kilometers trip was seen by the couple as an adventure, but it was also a major test for the entire family. Particularly impressed was tiny Lauren. They had never seen mountains before, and suddenly they found themselves at their feet. Lauren enjoyed to sing, was an energetic and fearless child, and played sports on a regular basis. She had a strong affinity for football at the age of 4 and enjoyed playing goalie. Krista fell pregnant again while Lauren was attending school. The family made the decision to move back to Oklahoma before the kid was even born in order to be nearer to Joe's parents and receive the assistance they needed. Managing 3 children would have been far more challenging. The family ventured to relocate once more in spite of the stress and challenges of the initial transfer. A child named Dustin was born to Krista on October 26, 2002, in remembrance of his cherished grandfather. He was born during the Halloween season, which turned into one of the family's favorite occasions. They planned themed parties each year and dressed up as various characters. The only girl in the group, Lauren grew up to be a real dad's daughter and was particularly close to Joe. He even taught her how to wield guns and track prey when he brought her hunting with him. The family added a boy named Tyler as a 4th child in February 2005. Lauren played doll-like with her younger brothers, feeding, dressing, and putting them to bed. She also spent a lot of time with them. The children got along well with their sister, and she never hurt them. The family made their home in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, a city of roughly 115,000 residents. Despite being a comparatively tiny city, it was the 4th largest in the state. Broken Arrow was regarded as the safest city in Oklahoma due to its low crime rate. Even yet, it was not enough to shield the family from the horrible disaster that befell them. 2009 saw a sea change in Lauren's life as she entered a challenging adolescent phase. Lauren began experiencing the typical troubles that come with adolescence, and her mental health issues made matters worse. After worried parents brought their only daughter in for a checkup, the physician determined that she had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. This illness impairs one's capacity for focus and impulse control. Medication administered to Lauren was meant to relieve her symptoms, but in reality, it made things worse. Lauren started to isolate herself from friends and family, becoming silent and reclusive. The swine flu epidemic, which mimicked the COVID-19 pandemic but on a smaller scale, made matters worse. The cherished grandfather of the family passed away at this time due to an infection, shocking all of the family members, especially the little ones who were closest to him. Lauren started hurting herself after this incident, which led to other issues. Krista has up until now maintained a joyful family video journal, but moving forward, the lighthearted and easygoing films gave way to darker ones. Krista started recording films of her daughter when she started hurting herself, hoping to see if any new injuries were developing. Krista was unable to determine what was going on or why her daughter's health was getting worse. Every time the conversation veered toward subjects that Lauren found uncomfortable and failed to connect, Lauren withdrew within herself. The true cause behind the teenager's withdrawal was revealed to the family at a later date. It transpired that Lauren had joined a new social circle recently. She was once left alone with an unknown peer who coerced her into having sex. The psychological impact of this on Lauren was terrible. Although Lauren was afraid to inform her parents about it, she was able to gain support as the truth came to light. Lauren was given a prescription for medicine and brought to psychotherapy sessions. Lauren's mental health stabilized during the ensuing years. She made new friends and returned to being gregarious and outgoing. Zach was first introduced to Lauren in 2012. They became friends right away and started hanging out all the time. The teenagers had similar appearances. They eventually fell in love with one another. Zach seemed like a kind and decent young man, so Lauren's family welcomed him with open arms. With the family's youngest members, Zach took on the role of an elder brother. When they both turned 16 in February of the same year, the young individuals set about their relationship official. Lauren made the decision to move in with her boyfriend and move out of her parents' house in the middle of the school year. Their goals were to move into an independent family, get married, and get an apartment. Lauren's parents thought Zach was too young to make such a significant life decision. Therefore, they did not share their daughter's excitement at the prospect of cohabitation. They were afraid of ruining their relationship with daughter and starting a fresh round of sadness, so they chose not to impede the girl's independence. However, Lauren's parents were worried that her romance might drive her to disregard her studies. The daughter eventually won their approval after assuring them that this would not occur. Lauren's mother, Krista, had a sneaking suspicion that her daughter was pregnant, which is why the decision to move in together and be married quickly was made. Lauren said she wasn't sure in response to a direct question about pregnancy. After that, Krista brought her to the hospital where a pregnancy test was performed. The results were positive. The family was surprised to learn of Lauren's early pregnancy, but they all encouraged her and looked forward to her baby's arrival. On March 22, 2015, Lauren, at 19 years old, gave birth to a girl named Edison Maine. Zach's parents were overjoyed to hear this news as well, accepting their new duties as grandfather and grandmother without passing judgment on the young couple. Lauren managed to finish her secondary education a few months after giving birth. On July 16, 2016, she was legally married to Zach, and the two then embarked on a honeymoon to Branson, Missouri. Although the pair appeared happy on the outside, Lauren had been battling inner demons for years. She made references to the severe anguish she was still experiencing from her previous emotional scars in posts on social media. Lauren was resolved to battle for her daughter and her loved ones at the same time. Zach obtained employment to support his family, although at first, parents of both of them gave a lot of assistance. But by October of 2016, things had shifted. Lauren bemoaned the monotony and dullness of daily living, expressed her frustration at being at home alone with the child all the time, and expressed her desire to start working as soon as possible in her posts. The young mother sought self-realization despite her unwavering love for her daughter, which she confided in her family about. The couple made the decision to upgrade their living arrangements at the same time. They offered to divide the cost of renting a larger flat with their old pals, Connor Browner and his girlfriend Alexandra Finley. They could save money and live comfortably as a result, even if they had kids. The two families eventually moved in together. Living together was peaceful and enjoyable at first. Everyone talked to one another, helped one another out, and spent time together. In an effort to become more independent, Lauren eventually secured a position as a salesperson at a business in 2017. She told her mother that she was still having depression problems at the same time. Lauren wore all black, including her makeup and hair color. Her general psychological state worsened as her marriage to her husband deteriorated. Sometime later, they split up and moved out separately from the couple of friends they lived with. Once more, Zach, Lauren, and their daughter were left on their own and experienced ennui. A few months later, the marriage started to fail. Zach went back to his mother in an attempt to ease the tension, but it was ineffective. Even for the benefit of the child, the couple was unable to rekindle their closeness, and the same year they filed for divorce. It's interesting to note that the ex-partner's relationship improved for a short while, but not permanently after the formal split. Consequently, they soon had the audacity to drastically alter their personal lives. Lauren experienced intense loneliness and a lack of male support when she was left alone with the child. She soon experienced the new love she had always yearned for. Their previous roommate Connor and Lauren began dating. Lauren and Connor grew closer as a result of their shared experience ending relationships, and a romantic spark emerged between them. Zach was devastated by this revelation and still held out hope for the family's reconciliation. All the same, he had to accept his ex-wife's decision. September 2017 marked the end of the divorce process. The parents decided to share weekly care of their 2-year-old daughter, giving them joint custody. Everyone was happy with this choice. Zach became even more hostile toward Connor as a result of his illicit drug use. Lauren eventually started smoking marijuana as well. Zach did not appreciate the raucous parties that were happening more and more in the apartment where lived his daughter. He made an unsuccessful attempt to sway his ex-wife. There were constant points of contention between Lauren and her new partner, and with Zach as well. When the girl's parents found out that their daughter had traded in her ex-husband for a man who led a chaotic lifestyle, they were taken aback. But they thought that eventually the young person would cool down and maybe they might salvage the connection. However, in contrast to what families had hoped for, nothing changed. After a year, Lauren's life was rapidly deteriorating by the fall of 2018. She and Connor discovered themselves surrounded by a public that used illegal substances. The young couple started going to parties more and more frequently. Furthermore, Lauren befriended Shanana, a wild individual who frequently incited risky circumstances. Lauren's parents were quite concerned about these situations. At that point, Lauren created a new social media profile using the identity of one of her alter personalities. The picture, with its dark, gothic aesthetic, conveyed the girl's inner turmoil. She talked extensively about dissociative identity disorder on the page, which is characterized by a person's identity splitting, giving the appearance that multiple personalities dwell in one body. Lauren appears to have recognized 4 of these subpersonalities in herself. Lauren was scheduled to meet her mother on October 26, 2018, in honor of her brother's birthday. But what awaited her was a somber talk rather than some enjoyable family time. Krista tried to talk to her daughter but couldn't get through to her about her lifestyle. After the conversation descended into a furious altercation, Lauren turned around, shut the door, and walked out. Her relatives had not seen her alive from that point. Blake, Lauren's friend, called Krista the following evening. Lauren was nowhere to be found, despite his agreement to drive her to a friend's house so they could get ready for Halloween. The guy was frightened by this and made the decision to call her mother. Blake claimed that he had met with Lauren the previous evening and driven her to the closest petrol station. Mike West, a tattoo artist, was waiting for Lauren that day. Lauren wanted to be dropped off there. They collaborated on the design of a new tattoo that she intended to have applied at his residence that same day. He continued to communicate with Lauren into the evening, according to her acquaintance. She gave him the specifics of the tattoo before abruptly ceasing to answer calls and messages. Blake was somewhat aback by this, since Lauren never let go of her phone. Lauren's mother, Krista, wrote to her current daughter's boyfriend, Connor, and her former son-in-law, Zach, in a panic after learning about this. Zach attested that although Lauren had intended to pick up their daughter, she never did. The relatives were further worried by this news. Krista called the police right away because she was so concerned. After receiving the missing person complaint, the police launched an investigation. Unfortunately, Blake's testimony, who isn't Lauren's close friend, was the only lead in the early phases of the investigation. The girl's friends and family provided the police with all the information they needed to put together a thorough account of the girl's appearance and attire on the day she vanished. They said Lauren was wearing jeans, boots, a black jacket, and a black blouse. The tattoo artist Blake had identified, Mike West, was located by the police rather fast. Mike verified that he had picked Lauren up from the gas station that evening and taken her to his house, where they were supposed to finish the tattoo sketch before moving on to actually tattooing the artwork into Lauren's body. The man added that Lauren's boyfriend, Connor, had unexpectedly joined them later. Lauren requested for permission to go out with Connor for a short while, and she reassured him that everything was well. But she never came back after that. Mike never saw her again, even though he waited for her the entire evening. Speaking with Connor, who appeared to be the last person to see Lauren before she disappeared, was the next course of action for the detectives. According to the guy, Lauren arranged to meet a buddy at the closest Walmart grocery on the day she was having her tattoo, so he took her there in his car. Connor said to have carried on with his company after that. He claimed that Lauren never followed through on her promise to call as soon as she had some spare time. Connor wasn't too concerned and held off on raising the alarm since he reasoned that perhaps a friend or another person had picked her up by then. Regarding the precise sequence of events that day, Connor's testimony contained some inconsistencies that the investigators took note of. They made the decision to closely examine his statements and ascertain Lauren's actual fate in the vicinity of that supermarket. The cops used footage from Walmart's security cameras, where Connor was rumored to have driven the missing girl, to accomplish this. After receiving the video files, law enforcement officials started to closely examine them. Krista, the mother of the missing girl, was also contacted by the detectives in the meantime. The mother said that Connor and her daughter had a poisonous connection, and initially, she was adamantly opposed to them communicating. The couple had been fighting more frequently in recent months, and their tension continued to rise. Additionally, Krista stated that Lauren and Connor had already broken up and were obviously not together on the day he was supposed to drive her to the grocery store when she vanished. Lauren avoided seeing her ex-boyfriend and communicating with him since she didn't want to carry on the relationship. The fact that Connor was the last person to see Lauren before her abduction hence caused great concern for the mother. The woman's animosity toward her daughter's former lover was openly expressed, particularly in light of his drug addiction and propensity for physical assault. Krista claims that Connor's constant pushing of Lauren was a contributing factor in their breakup. She was certain that the man was connected to her daughter's abduction, so she demanded that the investigators examine him closely. Zach, Lauren's ex-husband, was included in the group of suspects nevertheless. The detectives were aware that he was going through a very traumatic divorce from his wife, and that several of their mutual acquaintances had told them about her new connection. The cops were unable to see Connor's car when reviewing the security footage from the Walmart supermarket parking lot. Though it's possible that he just parked in a blind location, Lauren wasn't visible anywhere inside the business. Despite examining the CCTV records for several hours, the investigators were unable to locate the girl. This could only mean that Connor had lied once more. That is, that she had never been there. Lauren had been missing for more than 48 hours, which is a key amount of time beyond which the likelihood of discovering the missing individual alive dramatically decreases. Family members were beginning to lose hope. The authorities asked the public to assist in the search for the young mother after the woman's pictures went viral in the media. Abruptly, the police station hotline was called by an unidentified witness. He claimed to have seen Connor pull up to his house in his automobile the night Lauren vanished. Unidentified witness also said that Connor attempted to conceal the obvious bloodstains on the floor mats and seats in the cabin by covering them, but this did not totally cover them up. Connor allegedly said that he had struck a dog on the road in response to a question about the source of the stains. Everything was drenched in blood, he said, because he had to carry the injured animal in the cabin to the closest veterinary clinic. However, the witness thought there was just too much blood for this kind of explanation. The unidentified source said that he was unaware of Connor's girlfriend's disappearance at the time, which is why he failed to give the incident any urgency and failed to call the police. But after learning the news, he made the decision to alert the investigators to this dubious information. After learning of this, the investigators started to view Connor as the primary suspect in the crime. They made the decision to study his background and biography in more detail. It transpired that the man had already been afoul of the law, primarily as a result of a small-scale domestic dispute. Furthermore, once he resisted the police officers during the arrest. That time, Lauren phoned the police during a heated argument that transpired less than a year prior to their breakup. It's true that Lauren later chose not to file a lawsuit, which ended the dispute. The investigators also discovered that Connor was seeing someone else at the time of his ex-girlfriend's disappearance. It appeared that he was not at all concerned about Lauren's fate. But the detectives still called him in to ask him a few questions. Connor modified his prior testimony this time. In his revised account, he accompanied Lauren to Walmart on that particular day so she could get syringe needles. This was allegedly required for Lauren to receive painkiller injections after the tattoo appointment. Although Connor stated he was initially opposed to this proposal, he was unable to convince Lauren. He supposedly just carried on with his business after that, did not seeing her, and is unsure of what transpired next. The investigators' concerns were only aroused by such disparities in the testimony. Connor was obviously hiding something, as seen by the way he changed his storyline on a regular basis and added new elements. Additionally, neither his automobile nor Lauren were captured on camera near the grocery, and staff members at the business were unable to recall the youngster. The authorities were able to acquire the suspect's mobile phone data in order to follow his whereabouts. As it happened, Connor was very close to Walmart that night, approximately 10 p.m., which was far later than he had originally claimed. The police discovered that although Connor did visit the grocery that evening, he was there with a different girl, Alexandra Finley, his ex, who they had previously rented an apartment with. This information was discovered while reviewing the surveillance camera footage. The couple was filmed shopping for Halloween while wandering through the store with a carefree demeanor. However, the cops were particularly interested in the numerous cleaning supplies they had purchased. This felt like a really suspicious fact. The investigators made the decision to speak with Alexandra regarding such purchases because of their experience. Alexandra verified that Connor had called her that evening, requesting her assistance with washing the automobile. He related a tale about a fight that broke out in the car's cabin between two of his friends. One of them was wounded, supposedly, and the blood was all over the place. Then, posing as a hero, Connor drove the wounded man to the hospital. This is the reason the man called his ex-girlfriend for assistance, since he desperately needed cleaning supplies to clean. Alexandra accepted this bizarre tale, went shopping with Connor, and afterwards assisted him in cleaning the dried bloodstains from the carpets and upholstery. The police were able to examine the primary suspect's vehicle in great detail after obtaining a search warrant. They discovered many blood traces in the car, despite someone's best efforts to wipe them away. Nobody questioned that this blood belonged to the missing Lauren at that precise moment. Based on all the evidence, Lauren had lost a significant amount of blood. Therefore, the stains would never fully come out. After examining the site, experts determined that the person had most likely died from large blood loss following a severe injury. Samples of biological material were carefully gathered by investigators and sent off for analysis. Subsequent laboratory testing verified the worst suspicions. The blood found did in fact belong to Lauren, who went missing. Connor altered his testimony once more after being shown this proof. This time, the suspect stated that he had picked up Lauren from the grocery store, but that she was accompanied by a girl who was purportedly trying to get drugs from a friend. Lauren was shot in the head by the person who had pulled a gun after something went wrong. The murderer allegedly aimed the gun at Connor too, and told him to drive to the closest location where the body could be disposed of. After driving a short distance, the man put the lifeless Lauren into a garbage under the direction of the armed stranger. Connor maintained his innocence and non-involvement at the same time. This account of events sounded as muddled and unbelievable as the last ones. It was particularly frustrating because the trash in that area was picked up on a daily basis. The canisters were already empty when the police got there, but her bracelet and some blood, which very likely belonged to Lauren, were discovered there. Additionally, these samples were sent for analysis. Subsequent analysis verified that the blood discovered corresponded to the missing girl. On November 5, 2018, Connor was approached by the investigators in an attempt to get him to confess. The claim that Lauren was shot by some drug dealer was not taken seriously by the authorities. Eventually, they broke the suspect, and he admitted that he had argued with Lauren in the car that fatal night. Lauren steadfastly refused to leave the cabin. To intimidate her, her irritated ex-boyfriend took out a revolver. But as far as he was concerned, the magazine just dropped out by accident. Connor dropped to pick it up and accidentally squeezed the gun. Lauren was struck squarely in the face by the gunshot that went off. The authorities, however, did not think it was an accident. Their skepticism regarding Connor's veracity as a witness only grew. Nevertheless, because of the law enforcement officials' unwavering efforts, they were able to get a confession from the suspect regarding his actions. After being apprehended, the killer, 22, was booked into the Tulsa County Jail. The search for Lauren's body was the next duty. The detainee testified that he disposed of it in a paper waste bin, even giving a precise location. The GPS tracker data from his automobile provided confirmation of this. The contents of that container were transported to the closest landfill by a garbage truck the very next day. The police now had to locate the landfill to where it was transferred and locate the body as quickly as possible before it vanished into the vast rubbish dumps. The investigators identified the truck that emptied the unfortunate container after going over the CCTV camera footage. A team of 30 police officers was dispatched to investigate 72 sorting facilities that catered to 19 garbage recycling businesses throughout 16 states. Not much time remained for the hunt. The detectives were acquainted with every step of the recycling process for waste paper. It involved a number of technological processes that allowed the body to be broken up into tiny pieces. In theory, there were still a few locations where the remains might be located, but there was very little chance of this happening because the processing lines were highly automated and there weren't many employees. The police increasingly recognized after many hours of futile searching that Lauren's remains had probably already gone through the whole recycling process. But there was no stopping it. Finding the body was crucial for closely examining the wounds and contrasting them with Connor's story. It was agreed to send dog handlers with service dogs who are trained to look for corpses by the distinct smell of decomposition to the businesses in order to make this incredibly difficult duty easier. The canines eventually located the remains of the young woman. Pieces of skin, bones, and internal organs crushed by the processing machinery. The remains were officially confirmed by DNA experts to be those of the missing Lauren. To prevent human organs from finding their way into the finished product, the recycling company promptly recalled 30 tons of paper that had been created the day before. After finding out the horrific reality about her daughter's passing, Lauren's distraught mother sobbed as she informed the police about how painfully she remembered their final encounter. After a fight, they split up, and Krista will never be able to give her baby child a hug or say sorry to her again. The mother said that she was uncomfortable with Lauren's relationship with Connor right away, and told her daughter over and over again that the guy would only cause her sorrow. Regretfully, her worries were realized. The issues persisted even after the breakup. Krista had to make multiple calls to Lauren's ex-boyfriend, threatening to report him to the police if he didn't stop chasing the girl. But this narrative ended tragically. Even though the mother did her best to keep her daughter safe, Krista, unable to control her outrage at how viciously Connor treated her daughter, threw the body of her child in the trash like rubbish. Simultaneously, there were many in their town who backed the murderer. Some recalled him as just a regular guy who they shared their childhood years with. While no one defended what he had done, others hypothesized that the murder might have been an incidental or inadvertent event. Meanwhile, Connor's residence was thoroughly searched. In the garbage can, there was a gun. The sequence of events leading up to Lauren's death may be meticulously reconstructed thanks to all the information gathered. The prosecution claimed that when Connor enticed his ex-girlfriend to leave the tattoo artist's home, they started fighting in the car. Following a heated exchange of words, the irate man pulled out a gun, shot Lauren, and dropped her body into a dumpster. The murderer then, as if nothing had occurred, got down to clean the blood-stained car cabin before heading to work, and later that evening, out to meet friends. 2020 saw the matter appear in court in January. Connor never acknowledged his guilt, even in light of the overwhelming evidence the prosecution presented. He was confident that he would be found guilty of manslaughter at most by the jury. The prosecutors demonstrated the intentionality of this crime. The prosecutors released the findings of their examination of the communications from the defendant's phone, notwithstanding the attorney's insistence that the fatal shot was fired accidentally. It found out that Connor's relationship with another girl had started before his separation with Lauren. The man called his former girlfriend a parasite in texts he sent to his mistresses, speaking terribly of her. He accused Lauren of wrecking his life and refusing to leave him alone. Connor said in the same letter that he would be willing to commit any crime, including murder, in order to get rid of the bothersome ex-girlfriend. However, these claims ran counter to the victim's mother's evidence, which stated that Connor was the one who was chasing her daughter around and was unable to move on from the split. He made the decision that Lauren would not be with anyone since he could not let her go. The jury determined that the defendant was guilty of premeditated murder after taking into account all the relevant circumstances. Connor, age 23, was given a life sentence. He will, however, be able to request parole after 38 years and 3 months. Following the announcement of the verdict, Krista, the mother of the dead, declared that she would never pardon the person who killed her daughter. "We will never be able to come to terms with this loss," she said. We don't even have a place where we may visit and remember Lauren. We have no one to bury.
Oh my God.
You doing okay, sir?
No.
I understand. We're going to get you out there as quick as possible.
United States, North Canton is a city in central Stark County, Ohio. At the 2024 census, the population was 18,500. It is a suburb of the Canton-Massillon metropolitan area, a town where everything seemed out of place. And with hustle and bustle all around, a chilling story began to unfold. On an ordinary night, a brutal crime shrouded in mystery and horror was committed. The victim, a young woman known for her warmth and kindness, was found breathless. A story of insane obsession that turned to anger and anger to revenge. There are some people who are so deeply immersed in their dreams that for them, the line between the imaginary and the real becomes blurred. But what happens if such a dreamer tries to draw someone else into his illusions? Morgan Ashley Fox was born on August 2, 1991, in the small town of Canton, Ohio. From a young age, she was an obedient and calm child, a diligent student, and a loving daughter. Morgan had many friends and easily got along with any group. She was popular among her peers at school. As a teenager, she started dating a boy, and shortly after graduation, she found out she was pregnant. The young couple in love was over the moon with happiness. They had a daughter, whom they named Amelia. Because of her early pregnancy, Morgan did not enroll in college. Instead, she took a job as an operations manager for a delivery service. Here, during one of her shifts, she met Jason McDermott. He liked to play video games and spent most of his free time on the internet. After a while, he started bringing her food and drinks on every lunch break and talking about her nonstop to his friends and acquaintances. Colleagues eventually realized that Jason was genuinely fixated on Morgan. The impression from the outside was that it was as if the young people were involved in more than just friendship and socializing. In fact, his behavior resembled an obsessive crush, which alarmed some of his colleagues. The guy found Morgan's social media pages and started following her posts. He even installed a special app to monitor her activity confidentially. At times, Jason secretly recorded videos of the girl. Despite his fascination, he behaved in a friendly manner and did not bother Morgan to the point of causing her displeasure. In August 2020, Morgan brought her friend Mary to the company for training, and Mary ended up under Jason's supervision. The girl immediately noticed how often and how much he talked about Morgan. It was so intrusive that Mary suspected something was off and advised Jason to stop and cease tracking her friend. She wanted the guy to stop monitoring Morgan's social media pages and gradually distance himself from her in order to cope with his obsession. Mary knew about similar cases of stalking and understood that it could all end badly. Unfortunately, the secret admirer ignored this advice. Despite Mary's warnings, he constantly admired Morgan's beautiful hair, talked about her daughter, and everything related to the object of his desire. Jason clearly sought to develop a relationship and started with friendship. Now he had a new obsessive idea to ask Morgan out. He completely ignored the fact that the girl was already in a serious relationship, preparing for a wedding, and everything was going well with her fiancé. In June 2020, Morgan moved into a new house on Fraser Avenue with her fiancé and daughter, Amelia. To celebrate the housewarming and her birthday, our story's heroine decided to throw a party, inviting friends, relatives, and co-workers, including Jason. At that time, she considered him just a friend and was unaware of his obsession. For Jason, however, this invitation was another sign that Morgan was hiding her feelings for him. He had repeatedly shared his ideas about getting closer to the girl with other employees, but most doubted his plan would succeed. Of course, he ignored these warnings, as his own fantasies convinced him of the need to confess to his beloved. Jason decided to use the party to finally stop being just a friend and become Morgan's boyfriend. Jason acted like he was a member of the Morgan family at the party. The hidden admirer helped organize the party, served the food himself, and even struck up a conversation with Morgan's grandmother as if he were a member of the family. Overall, he was pleasant and accommodating, but his actions seemed strange and intrusive. Some of those present tried to find out the identity of this young man and whether he was romantically involved with Morgan. Morgan vehemently denied any romantic relationship with him, referring to Jason as just a good friend and co-worker. Most likely, it was very upsetting for the guy, because he was afraid of being rejected and never dared to declare his feelings openly. Later, an incident occurred that seriously damaged their friendly relationship. On October 8, 2020, Morgan briefly left her mobile phone unattended at work. Jason, knowing the password he had previously peeked at, took this opportunity to learn even more about his beloved on her device. He unexpectedly discovered intimate photos of Morgan and, being delighted, even showed them to other guys from the office. Upon returning to her workplace, the girl quickly realized that someone had used her phone and viewed the explicit pictures. This made her very angry. Jason was an obvious suspect because he was always near her desk. A co-worker hinted to Morgan to pay attention to 3 young men who were discussing something near her seat while she was eating lunch. She approached them to ask, and they immediately ratted Jason out, claiming that he had done it. Morgan became furious and accused him of invading her privacy. Jason denied everything at first, but then succumbed to the pressure. Infuriated, Morgan stopped communicating with him and blocked him on social media. Finally, her eyes were opened to his unhealthy obsession and stalking of her. She heard from colleagues about his frank conversations and infatuation with her, which caused concern. Morgan knew about stalkers and was afraid of becoming a victim of one. Therefore, she completely cut off contact with Jason and even told colleagues about her desire to change jobs. Obviously, Morgan's reaction was not taken calmly by Jason. Although he understood his guilt, he assured the girl that he had only viewed her intimate photos but had not downloaded or shared them, although it later turned out to be untrue. However, Morgan was adamant in her decision to stay away from him. Meanwhile, Jason asked colleagues to help him restore communication with the girl. He wrote her a long letter of apology, which several acquaintances signed. In this message, he begged for forgiveness and asked to be unblocked on social media. Through the mediation of colleagues, he continued to bombard Morgan with messages and tried to call her, but was rejected every time. Jason's friends and co-workers noticed changes in his behavior and appearance. Literally the day after Morgan brushed him off, he became disheveled, unkempt, and ignored remarks from the department manager. It was evident that, due to the quarrel and obsession, Jason was barely sleeping and looked bad. Moreover, during lunch breaks, it became noticeable that he had stopped eating properly. Despite everything, the young man still cherished the hope of rebuilding his relationship with Morgan. On October 24, 2020, Morgan was visiting relatives in Columbus, Ohio. Jason sent her a short message asking how she got to her family. The girl was shocked, as she had told almost no one about this trip. She realized that Jason was still following her. When she asked him how he knew about her being in another city, there was no response. This brief dialogue was the last documented communication between our story's heroine and her stalker. On October 28, 2020, Morgan Ashley Fox was getting ready to go to work on the night shift. The groom escorted his beloved to the door, kissed her goodbye, and they parted. He went to bed, and she to her car. When the man woke up around 6 a.m. to get ready for work, he made himself coffee as usual and looked out the window. What he saw instantly alarmed him. Morgan's car was still in the driveway, and moreover, it was parked in such a way that it could not be fully seen. This seemed strange, as his fiancée's work shift had not yet ended. Troubled by what he saw, the guy decided to go outside and examine the car with his own eyes to find out what had happened. On the way, he grabbed his mobile phone and tried to call Morgan, but at the very moment he crossed the threshold and opened the front door, he heard the sound of her phone ringing. The fiancé ran to the car and saw a terrible sight. The driver's side door was open, and in the seat was his beloved, covered in blood and showing no signs of life. She did not respond to the calls of her mobile phone, which lay at her feet on the ground and was ringing incessantly. Stunned by what he saw, the frightened young man immediately called 911 emergency services.
911, you need police, fire, or medical help?
Police, medical. I'm pretty sure my girlfriend's dead. I got up for work, came out, looked outside, seen her car out here. I came out here and she's laying in her front seat. Oh my my God.
You doing okay, sir?
No.
I understand. We're going to get you sent out here as quick as possible.
A team of paramedics, along with the police, arrived at the scene in just a few minutes. They officially declared 29-year-old Morgan Ashley Fox dead, the cause of which left no doubt: 2 gunshot wounds to the head. Apparently, the victim had just managed to get behind the wheel when she was attacked. Her feet were still on the ground while her body was already in the car seat. Characteristic signs of rigor mortis had already appeared on the body, by which the time of death was determined quite accurately, around 2 in the morning. The girl died instantly and without suffering after the very first fatal shot to the head. Unfortunately, there were no video surveillance cameras installed in the area of the house where the couple lived. Also, no spent casings were found at the crime scene. Neither the neighbors nor the victim's fiancé heard any gunshots or noise from an unfamiliar vehicle. None of them noticed anything suspicious that night. Nevertheless, the investigators managed to find tire tracks on the asphalt that were obviously left in a hurry. It appears the attacker fired 2 shots, probably from a pistol equipped with a silencer, and then quickly disappeared from the crime scene in a car. This was clearly evidenced by the nature of the marks on the road surface. As the car drove away, pieces of rubber, earth, and mud were bursting out from under the wheels. However, despite this, none of the local residents heard anything suspicious. The deceased's fiancée and her friends told investigators about one intrusive young man who had been behaving strangely for a long time and was clearly very interested in Morgan. Of course, they were talking about Jason, her co-worker, with whom the girl's relationship had seriously deteriorated shortly before the tragedy. Many considered him the most likely suspect in Morgan's murder. The police decided to check his alibi and found out that he had arrived at his night shift at 2:57 a.m., where he stayed until about 10 a.m., after which he went home. Theoretically, the guy had the opportunity to commit the crime, since his alibi was not confirmed at 2 in the morning, but the time frame was pretty narrow. Many people described Jason's strange relationship with Morgan, who, in her naivety, allowed him to get too close to her. People said that she allowed this man too much, recalling at least his behavior during the party at her house where he felt like the host. Ultimately, it all resulted in a clear violation of privacy and an intrusion into the girl's personal life, because of which she completely ceased communication with this colleague. Investigators were well aware of this model of behavior, and stalkers refusing to communicate often becomes a motive for them to attack. For police officers, the most intriguing information was the significant change in the young man's behavior after Morgan brushed him off. He began to behave carelessly and was clearly experiencing psychological problems. It was very strange that after Morgan's murder, he had stopped by the car wash after work and thoroughly washed his blue Ford from top to bottom, even though it was pouring rain outside and there was no reason to wash the car. It didn't really jibe with his recent carelessness about his appearance, about which his co-workers had expressed concern. They said he didn't care about his car or how he looked. Moreover, according to the testimony of co-workers, the car was clean and clearly not in need of maintenance. An examination of his vehicle yielded no results. Nothing was found inside. Of course, the investigators treated this information with suspicion. First of all, they checked the only available evidence, the tire tracks left in the mud in front of the victim's driveway. It seemed that the tread prints were identical to the tires of Jason's car. Moreover, such a tread pattern was quite rare. Undoubtedly, this automatically made him the prime suspect in the murder. In search of evidence, the police reviewed the recordings from all the surveillance cameras that could have captured the perpetrator's route. In the footage, they managed to spot a car similar to Jason's when it stopped at one of the intersections near Morgan's house. The recording was made at 1:35 a.m., after which the car headed towards the home of his future victim. It was captured on cameras a second time around 2:20 a.m., when it was returning the same way. When investigators learned about Jason's intrusive behavior, they decided to thoroughly examine his electronic devices. Thanks to this, the detectives were able to prove that the suspect was gathering information about the girl, secretly monitoring her activity on social networks. This allowed him to find out almost everything about her, where she lived, what her daily routine was, which made it possible to plan the attack in such a way as to remain unnoticed. To investigators' surprise, The suspect's cell phone did not signal in the area of the victim's home at the time of her murder. All this time, the device was at Jason's house. The guy explained this by saying that he had forgotten his mobile phone and worked the whole shift without it. For the same reason, he allegedly could not find out why the object of his obsession did not show up for work. However, this did not exclude the possibility that he deliberately left the phone at home to avoid tracking his whereabouts and divert suspicion from himself. The perpetrator turned out to be quite cunning and cautious, which seriously complicated the investigation. On November 1, Jason published a post on his social media page in memory of Morgan in which he wrote, "You were a bright light in my life and the lives of many other people. You were always there when I needed you. I would like to list everything about how you influenced my life, but the list would be so long that we would never reach the end. You were a friend. If I had a bad day, I knew that I could always come and talk to you." This post ended with the hashtag #JusticeForMorgan. 3 days after the crime, Jason went to the store with his friend Mickey. There, he continued to talk about Morgan, who was no longer among the living. From Jason's words, it followed that he had an intimate relationship with the deceased girl. And now these memories would remain the only recollection of her, which he intended to cherish for the rest of his life. 4 more days after the massacre, he again found himself in the company of his buddy Mickey. He asked about exactly how the video cameras that capture traffic on the roadways work. He was interested in whether they record continuously or only take short videos when sensors detect speeding, but he never got an answer to his question. During a meeting with the mother of the deceased at the funeral, Jason continued to surprise with his behavior. He told the woman a story about how he once gave her daughter a stuffed toy, and now he insistently asked to return this gift, claiming that it would be a good reminder of what a wonderful person Morgan was. The young man was so persistent that he almost broke into the mother of the victim's car, begging her to give him the toy. The woman even had to raise her voice to finally get him off her back with this request. Fortunately, the evidence gathered against Jason in the form of surveillance camera footage and tire tread marks were sufficient for his arrest. On November 4, 2020, he was detained on suspicion of committing the murder and later charged with premeditated murder with aggravating circumstances and stalking with threats. After his arrest, police scrutinized his hands. In the case of using a firearm, traces of gunpowder gases can remain on the skin for a long time, and they are not always washed off even during a shower. Therefore, there was a possibility that even a few days after the crime, these traces could still be detected. Forensic experts conducted a thorough analysis, but no powder residue was found on Jason's body. His clothing, which he was wearing on the night of the attack, was also checked, but no traces of gunpowder gases were found on it either. This fact was actively used by the suspect's lawyer, trying to prove the absence of direct evidence and the clear contradiction of the facts with the version of the investigation. On April 2, 2021, the trial in this case was held. In court, several witnesses from both the victims and Jason's inner circle considered the murder charge to be erroneous. The defense argued that the police relied only on indirect evidence, while there was no direct evidence of the young man's involvement in the girl's death. Many friends and relatives described him as a calm and non-aggressive person. Despite his obvious obsession with his colleague, none of them could believe that Jason was capable of such a thing. And indeed, the prosecution's arguments were based solely on indirect evidence. But all the circumstantial evidence pointed specifically to Jason. Detectives have discarded the robbery or sexual assault leads. Firstly, the victim was not missing anything, including valuables in the car and her purse. Secondly, no signs of sexual violence were found either. It was a quiet, peaceful area where no gangs operated, so Morgan could hardly have become an accidental victim of some criminal showdown. The nature of the tire tread marks found at the crime scene matched those of the defendant's car. Moreover, the attacker clearly tried to make it so that his car remained unnoticed by the victim. He could have lurked in ambush, waiting for the right moment. According to the prosecutors, the defendant wanted Morgan not to see his vehicle until it was too late, and she did not have time to call for help. One of the key questions in the case was the murder weapon, which was never found. It was known that Jason owned a firearm. He had a Ruger .22 caliber revolver, which law enforcement seized for inspection. The victim was shot with a similar weapon, but after a ballistic examination, it became clear that this particular revolver was not the instrument of the crime. The investigation never managed to find the very pistol from which the fatal shots were fired. However, this did not exclude the possibility that Jason could have illegally purchased another pistol with a silencer, killed the girl, and then disposed of the weapon. In addition, the prosecution focused on the suspect's strange behavior, in particular on the fact that he thoroughly washed his car, probably immediately after the attack, and this despite the fact that it was raining outside. The young man tried to explain his actions by the presence of mental problems and symptoms of obsessive-compulsive disorder. However, the experts did not confirm that he had any such disorders. Anyway, taken together, these facts looked extremely suspicious. When the defendant was asked why he was in the area of the victim's home shortly before her murder, he denied the very fact of his presence there. However, there was no exact geolocation data to confirm the police's words, since his phone remained at home and the GPS module in the car was turned off. The only evidence that he was there was the recordings from the surveillance cameras, but the defense argued that the footage simply captured a similar car, because due to the poor quality of the night shooting, it was impossible to see the license plates. As for washing the car, Jason additionally explained this by saying that he was allegedly going to go to his mother to give her a birthday present, so he decided to wash the car beforehand. However, as it turned out, the holiday itself took place back in June, 4 months before that, so on the part of the son, it looked like an obvious delay. Naturally, the court regarded his words as untrue. Numerous witnesses at the trial spoke about the defendant's obsessive behavior towards Morgan. He clearly tried to cross boundaries and pretend to be a much closer person than he actually was. The girl did not take his behavior seriously, which allowed him to get so close to her and even cherish illusions about a possible shared future. Jason did indeed manage to become a close friend of Morgan's, right up until he violated her privacy by looking at the explicit photos. This happened just 20 days before the massacre, after which the young man desperately tried to restore their communication, but all his efforts were in vain. It was probably this that pushed him to such radical actions. After all, he was the only one with a real motive for murder. On the night of the murder, colleagues noticed striking changes in Jason's behavior at work. He looked much more cheerful than in previous days. When asked what had happened, the guy said that Morgan had supposedly resumed communication with him and even added him as a friend on social media, so he hoped that she had given him another chance. However, employees doubted the truthfulness of his words because before that, they had communicated with Morgan and knew about her unwavering position regarding Jason. That same night, Jason showed his colleagues a photograph in which he and Morgan were pictured together in the office. He considered this picture a wonderful, friendly gift. At the same time, the guy himself expressed concern that the girl did not show up for work. To all the questions of his colleagues, he answered that he had no idea where Morgan could be since he had left his mobile phone at home. Later, when everyone learned about the girl's death, his actions began to seem even stranger. Jason's behavior changed again. He became more agitated and repeatedly expressed concern that GPS data from his car could be the reason for being held liable. He confessed to his colleagues that he was passing through the area where Morgan lived on his way to work on the night shift, but then changed his story and began to claim that the GPS device in his car could have been hacked and someone was trying to frame him. Then, Jason told his coworkers that the day after the murder, his car was allegedly stolen but quickly returned. Later, detectives found out that Jason had created a fake social media page, which he used to spread a fictional story about his intimate relationship with Morgan. He described in detail what allegedly happened between them, and even used explicit photos of the girl from her phone as confirmation of his words. This activity began back in June 2020, and according to the prosecution, could have been an attempt to create an alibi. In these conversations, the suspect told several women the same story on behalf of Morgan, the same one that he retold to his friend Mickey while walking around the store. It seems he was trying to spread information about intimacy with the victim, probably to divert suspicion from himself. Bullets matching the gun used to shoot Morgan were indeed found in Jason's home. However, he claimed that he kept this ammunition for his father's revolver, which was given to him as a means of self-defense. due to the absence of casings at the crime scene, the ballistic examination could not definitively establish from which weapon the shots were fired. At the same time, such a number of coincidences looked extremely suspicious and became another indirect piece of evidence of the young man's guilt. Jason's close friend came to his defense. According to his buddy, the defendant never showed aggression or anger towards Morgan. Although he was obsessed with the girl, he would never harm her. According to the friend, Jason was extremely upset that Morgan had blocked him on social media and refused to communicate. He was very worried about this, lost his appetite and sleep. But according to the confession of a close friend, Jason blamed only himself for everything and understood that he had done wrong. He did not feel rage towards the girl and was not going to take revenge on her, so he clearly could not be the perpetrator of this murder. The defendant himself insisted that under no circumstances could he have done this to Morgan. He admitted that he had the most tender feelings for her and was ready to let her go if it was impossible to build a relationship. The lawyers emphasized the fact that Morgan Fox was an attractive girl and had many admirers. In their opinion, from the very beginning of the investigation, the police focused only on Jason and actually did not consider other possible suspects. They say the goal of the detectives was to prove Jason's guilt and not to find the real culprit. However, despite the persuasiveness of the defense's arguments, the prosecution insisted that it had done all the necessary work, during which no other obsessed admirers of Morgan were identified except for Jason. The deceased's fiancée also underwent a thorough check. No traces of gunpowder gases were found on his hands, which were examined immediately after the tragedy. There were no bloodstains on his clothes, and he successfully passed a polygraph test. According to the prosecution, Jason was a skilled manipulator who had been hiding behind the mask of a treacherous friend for years. The defendant turned out to be a pathological liar who managed to deceive everyone around him, but everything's secret became apparent when he lost control of his feelings for the victim. Then it became clear that in reality, he was a self-centered and extremely jealous type. And after the phone incident, the girl decided to completely sever all ties with him. Jason harbored a grudge and decided to take revenge. He simply could not come to terms with the fact that Morgan would be with someone else. This idea was also confirmed by the behavior of the defendant himself. He clearly harbored illusions about the relationship with the victim and was wishful thinking. Despite all the efforts of the investigation, the young man turned out to be surprisingly well prepared. Throughout the entire investigation, forensic experts never managed to find the murder weapon, bullet casings, any fingerprints, DNA traces, or personal belongings that Jason could have left at the crime scene. He even managed to skillfully hide his exact whereabouts, despite the fact that modern technology is literally packed with tracking tools. All this put the prosecution in an extremely disadvantageous position. They had to convince the jury and prove the suspect's guilt, relying only on indirect evidence and assumptions. The only physical evidence that was obtained was the tread marks identical to those on the wheels of the defendant's car. The prosecution tried to prove that a typical stalker appeared before the jury who acted exactly as people of his type usually do in such situations. He really pursued Morgan, which was confirmed by numerous correspondences and the testimony of colleagues. That's the question. Could he really have gone so far as to kill someone he loved so much? On April 22, 2021, the jury retired to the deliberation room to discuss the verdict. The court found Jason guilty of aggravated murder as well as harassment. Jason McDermott was sentenced to 180 days in prison for stalking in addition to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jason McDermott has never admitted his guilt. Jason's lawyer insisted on a review of the verdict, but all appeals were rejected by the court.
Today we will look at a tragic story that will shock you, so watch this video until the end. In a quiet town, a sudden and chilling crime shatters the peace, causing a series of shocking revelations. What began as an ordinary day quickly degenerates into a nightmare. A story of kidnapping and murder that attracts attention from all sides. A man trusted by many becomes the center of a nightmarish investigation that will uncover dark secrets and spark deep legal debates. As the investigation unfolds, it becomes clear that this was no random act, but a meticulously planned crime. Fear and disbelief grip the community as dark secrets emerge, painting a picture of the perpetrator's twisted mind. The horrors that came to light were not only shocking, but deeply disturbing. The case takes an even darker turn when a heartbreaking confession is made that shocks even the most seasoned investigators. Amidst this chaos, a brave man emerged whose courage and quick thinking played a decisive role in revealing the truth. This story begins in Bend, an attractive city in Oregon located on the Deschutes River. Kaylee Sawyer lived in the same house with her boyfriend Cameron. Kaylee worked as a dental assistant and was also busy with her studies at Central Oregon Community College. She was artistic and loved to write poetry, draw, and take pictures. She loved wakeboarding, skiing, golf, fishing, and many other outdoor sports. The city of Bend, where Kaylee lived, offered photographers many stunning landscapes to capture on camera. It was the perfect place for Kaylee to live. She was close to both of her parents, who remarried after divorcing when she was young. Her 4 brothers were also close to her. Friends and family considered her one of the happiest people they knew. She was kind, loving, often smiling, and a joy to be around. When she went for walks, she often interacted with other people on the street. Even though they were strangers, everyone was a friend to Kaylee, her mother noted. On July 23, 2016, Kaylee was heading to a friend's bachelorette party. After packing her things, she left her house to meet everyone near her college campus in downtown Bend. After she parked her car at her friend's house, they all headed to the party. Kaylee and her friends spent the next few hours going from pub to bar. Everyone was having a great time celebrating, dancing, singing, playing games, and enjoying the drinks. The evening was so fun that at one point, Kaylee started dancing in a pub with a stranger. Cameron, her boyfriend, received a text from one of his friends who accidentally spotted her in a pub dancing with a stranger. The party was coming to an end on July 24. After a late night of drinking, Kaylee called her boyfriend Cameron to ask for a ride home. Kaylee also texted Cameron's friend to apologize for what he might have thought was an inappropriate dance with another man. Cameron arrived, grabbed Kaylee, and put her in his car. An argument immediately ensued, which continued all the way home. As the argument got even more heated, Cameron says he got out of the car when they parked outside their apartment building. Kaylee was left alone, crying and saying she needed some time to get over it. 10 minutes later, Cameron went back outside to try to talk her into going home, since it was too late to argue and if they just went to bed, everything would be fine the next day. But when he got to the car, he realized that the passenger door was wide open and she was not inside. Cameron looked around and Kaylee Sawyer was nowhere to be seen. Cameron started looking for Kaylee and sent her several texts. "Where are you, Kaylee? Please, just come home to be with me. I don't want to play this game." Kaylee responded by saying, "My phone is about to die." Cameron wrote, "Please don't do this to me. I'm sorry that I was upset and shouted when I picked you up." Kelly replied, "Are you kidding? Because it's not an apology." She then turned off her phone and stopped responding. Cameron went to a friend's house, hoping that Kaylee had walked there, but she wasn't there. Cameron drove around the streets, trying to find her, but to no avail. Cameron called Kelly's mother, Julie, but she said she hadn't seen her daughter. Cameron called her friends, but they didn't know where she was either. Much time passed, but Kaylee didn't answer calls or texts. There was still hope that she had gone to someone's house to cool off, but that seemed less and less likely as time went on. Cameron called the police in desperation.
Hi. I'm not sure if this is quite the right number to call. Last night I got home from the bars with my girlfriend. She got upset at me and ran off. And I chased her and wasn't able to find her, and I still haven't heard from her. Her phone's off. I called all her family and they haven't heard from her, so I'm wondering what you recommend I do.
We put in a call and we can have officers and deputies look for her.
Okay.
Where was she last seen at?
College Way.
In that apartment complex?
Yes.
In a specific apartment or?
In the parking lot. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, she was mad at me, so I walked inside and told her to come meet me in there when she was like, calm down. And then I went back out in 10 minutes and she was gone. And I called her a few times and she said she was walking down the street. And then I guess she said her phone was about to die. And then I couldn't get a hold of her after that. I haven't heard from her since.
Okay. She took off on foot?
Yes.
What's her last name?
Sawyer.
First name?
Kaylee. Kaylee.
And she's got her phone with her?
She did last I saw her, but it's been dead all day, and
What's the phone
I
number?
imagine she would charge it.
Do you know what carrier it is?
It is Verizon. She has a vehicle. It's parked at her friend's house, and I've been over there and talked to her friend, and she hasn't heard from her either.
And the vehicle's still there?
Yep.
Any idea where she would go, or?
I don't know. I figured she'd go where her car was, to her best friend's or her mom's, and I've been over to both. Talked to her dad, and I just haven't heard anything from anybody knowing this.
Okay. All right, we'll have an officer get in contact with you. If she gets in contact with you, they'll give us a call back.
Okay, will
All
do.
right. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, bye.
When news broke that Kaylee was missing, her name started appearing on social media and hundreds of volunteers came out to look for her. After questioning her boyfriend Cameron, he was quickly ruled out by police because they had no reason to doubt him or what he said. They also questioned her friends, who she had been out with that evening. They told police they had seen her with a stranger. The man she had been seen dancing with in the pub caught their attention, and they thought it would lead to a lead. But he was also shocked by her disappearance. He had only danced with her for a few minutes before she joined her group of friends, and then she left. He never saw her again after that. She was last seen early Sunday morning near the parking lot of her West Bend apartment, walking toward nearby Central Oregon Community College. Her mother says her daughter is very close to her family, and it's very unusual for them to not hear from her for 2 days. The mother says they are extremely worried and just want their Kaylee back. Missing 23-year-old Kaylee Sawyer has much of Central Oregon on edge. Thousands of concerned residents spent the day posting flyers and sharing their concerns on Facebook. Everybody was definitely concerned, but Kaylee's mother, Julie, was far more than that. She said the second she heard her daughter was missing and not replying to anyone, she felt a shift in her whole body and something was telling her that Kaylee was no longer alive. Officers started trying to find the location of her phone. Her phone was pinging all over the city of Bend, but sadly, this was confirmed to be an old iPhone that was still registered under Kaylee's Apple ID. It was now Monday morning, and Kaylee hadn't shown up to her shift at the dental clinic. Police knew they had to pick up the pace, and Kaylee entered law enforcement databases as an endangered missing person. Out of the blue, a woman came to the police station, claiming to have information that would shock them. She told them that her husband had been acting very strange for the past couple of days and had been telling her incredibly disturbing and shocking things. Her husband was 31-year-old Edwin Lara, and Isabel said that his strange behavior had been noticeable since he came home very late on Sunday after finishing his shift. He often worked late as a security guard on a college campus.
When he works a graveyard like he did on Saturday night, he starts at like 3 p.m. What time? Like, does he work like a 12-hour shift or?
It's always changing.
It's always changing.
It's always unpredictable. So I actually was on the point that I didn't even know when he was going to be working or not.
So what time is church on Sunday?
9 in the morning.
Okay. Are you noticing anything weird at all at this point?
So yeah, so he was very quiet, like on the way to church. Wasn't saying much. This is unusual.
Mm-hmm.
At church, he was just very quiet, very withdrawn. Like he would usually like grab my hand or something. He wasn't doing it. So when we get out of church, I asked him, "What's wrong with you? What's going on?" And I told him, we've been together for a very long time. I know something's up. He comes out of the room, and his eyes were all teary. That's why I'm like, "What happened? Tell me what happened. What's wrong?" So he sits on the sofa. I turn off the TV. And then he just said that. He's like, I kill a woman, that's what he said.
Officers went straight to the home where they found exactly what Isabel said they would. Kaylee's purse and ID, her shoes, a blood-stained rock, and a clump of what looked like it could be Kaylee's hair. What they found pointed to far more than accidentally hitting her with his car and panicking. Everything was pointing towards this being a violent homicide. By this point, however, Edwin was already on the run, embarking on what would become an interstate crime spree. After leaving his car at his parents' house, he spotted a 19-year-old called Andrea sitting in her car in a parking lot. She had just clocked off a 12-hour shift and was about to head home when Edwin opened the passenger side door, pointed a gun at her, and demanded she start driving. As she drove, he showed her pictures of him in his campus security uniform and spoke to her about the news reports talking about Kaylee. After 3 hours on the road, Edwin wanted to stop at a motel for the night. As he checked in, he made Andrea pretend to be his girlfriend. Once inside the room, he handcuffed her to the bathroom door while he showered. He then ordered her to take a shower in front of him. Andrea was fighting against him every step of the way and point blank refused. After this, he handcuffed her to the bed and told her to take sleeping pills. At this very moment, the alarm on her phone went off. Thinking on her feet, Andrea lied, telling Edwin she had an STD and the alarm was to remind her to take her medication. She hoped this would stop him from sexually assaulting her, and fortunately, her plan worked. Edwin, who was becoming more paranoid by the minute, then decided to leave the motel at 1:30 in the morning. The pair carried on driving until 5 a.m. before stopping at another motel. He walked over to a 73-year-old man near his vehicle and tried to take it before shooting him in the stomach. He didn't get the car, but fortunately, the man survived. Edwin then fled with Andrea on foot to a nearby gas station where he carjacked a 76-year-old woman. The woman and her 2 young grandsons were inside the car. He forced one of the teens to drive the car at gunpoint before letting them go and continuing with the vehicle. Thankfully, the family was unharmed. Edwin ordered Andrea to start driving to California, where he had family. During the drive, Edwin used Andrea's phone to record a video of himself.
Hi, everybody. I just want to say that I apologize for everything I've done. Most likely I'm going to get caught. And sorry about that girl in Central Oregon. And I also want to let family members, Andrea, that she's fine and she will be fine since so far she's been doing what I've been told to do. I used to kill that other girl, and I regret it. I regret killing her. She kept screaming, and I'm sorry her forever.
He made her post it to Facebook, titling it "Murderer on the Loose." Edwin called his family to tell them what was going on, and at 6:40 a.m., he called 911, telling them who he was and what he was wanted for. A California Highway Patrol officer saw the car speeding on the interstate and tried to pull it over. The chase reached more than 100 miles per hour before Edwin was eventually pulled over. Before he was arrested, he recorded himself saying, I know this is being recorded, and I just want to say to the family of Kaylee that, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I did, and in time, I will tell them where the body is. He then handed the phone over to Andrea, and the police placed him in handcuffs. 19-year-old Andrea was also arrested, but when they realized that she too was another innocent victim, she was released. When Edwin was taken into custody, he told the officers the same story he had told Isabel, that he had accidentally hit her with his car, but said that he had then strangled her when she wouldn't stop screaming, something which everybody agreed made no sense at all. After this, the detective told him that it was for the best that he come clean, as he would only have to answer to God and repent his sins. Everyone who knew Edwin said he was devout in his religion and that it was one of the most important things to him. So, the detective decided to use this knowledge to hopefully get a confession. Kaylee got out of Cameron's car and walked down the road, and when Edwin saw her, he followed her in his car. The conversation between the pair, if any, remains unknown, but somehow Kaylee ended up in the back seat of his car. Police and Kaylee's family believed that Edwin had offered her a ride, and she had accepted, believing she would be safe with a security guard in his car. Students leaving clubs or bars were often given rides home by campus security, so this likely wasn't unusual or alarming. But once Kaylee got in, she was trapped. The doors wouldn't open from the inside, and she was completely helpless. It wasn't long before Edwin started demanding that she have sex with him, and when she refused, he strangled her until she was unconscious. He then drove her several miles where he began to choke her again and hit her on the head with a rock. He then raped her. Kaylee was still alive, and Edwin grabbed another rock and hit her in the head and left her body there. It is unknown whether she was still alive at this point, which is a truly horrendous thing to contemplate. After this, he drove back to the college campus, where he changed cars and drove back later in an attempt to conceal her body. After he told them everything, officers went to locate the first car that Edwin had been driving when he went on the run, and inside were some handwritten notes, one of which read, "The place I killed her is on the B12 lot. Run her over on College Way," and another which said, "This note is to say that I am sorry for taking her life." It was after this that, near a canyon off of Highway 126, the body of Kaylee Sawyer was finally found. Despite his confession, Edwin Lara pleaded not guilty, and the prosecution announced that they would be seeking the death penalty. Edwin's lawyers argued that his rights had been violated in the interview room, as he wasn't given the option to make any phone calls while being held in custody. To everybody's dismay, during a pre-trial hearing, a judge actually threw out his lengthy and detailed confession and said that it could not be used as evidence. The prosecution was then left hoping that the forensic evidence would be enough, but it was undoubtedly a huge blow to their case. Edwin's attorney called his crime spree an enigma and said it could only be explained by his client's genetic degenerative cognitive brain disability. The prosecution said there was no doubt he was a potential serial killer and psychopath. In January 2018, in order to avoid the death penalty, Edwin changed his plea to guilty of aggravated murder and robbery. Despite the evidence they had in Kaylee's case, the charges of sexual assault did not stick. Although Edwin had pleaded guilty, he did not plead guilty to sexual assault. The county district attorney spoke with Kaylee's family and told them that their main goal as prosecutors was to put Edwin away for life, and pushing for a sexual assault conviction as well might complicate the trial and jeopardize the chances of getting a life sentence for murder. Her family begrudgingly agreed. Kaylee's mom stated, "Number one, I want our Kaylee back home, alive and well, living her life. Number two, I would like to see that piece of trash, the defendant, sentenced to death for what he did to Kaylee. And number three, I would like the court system and the state of Oregon to just hand him over to me and let me carry out the death penalty." She also called Edwin Lara a monster. With this, Edwin Lara was given a life sentence without parole for the murder of Kaylee Sawyer. He later received a second life sentence for the kidnap of Andrea. Following their testimonies, Lara himself addressed the court, making an emotional plea for forgiveness. "Today, I don't have much to say to you at this moment. Prayer is something I'd like to speak to whoever is willing to listen." After Lara's speech before the court, Judge Michael Adler called Lara's actions cold-hearted beyond belief, and added that Lara was fortunate that a jury would not be sentencing him to death. The judge praised Andrea for her extraordinary courage and bravery while being held hostage. Kaylee's family filed a lawsuit against the college for failing to do an adequate background check on Edwin and for not acting upon behaviors that gave many people cause for concern. One female officer actually refused to ride in the same car as him and reported him because he scared her so much. The lawsuit also included evidence that the campus safety vehicles very closely resembled police patrol cars, and Central Oregon Community College officers were given uniforms that were also similar to the Bend Police. Community officers were armed with pepper spray, ballistic vests, body cameras, and handcuffs, and drove vehicles with cages inside. The lawsuit said this simply should not be allowed, as it allowed people to abuse their position. In 2022, the Kaylee family finally entered into a settlement agreement with the Central Oregon Community College in the amount of $2 million. After a while, a wild and terrible tragedy occurred. 2 drug criminals broke into Kaylee's mother's house. Over the course of 12 months, criminals robbed many people, including Kaylee's mother's house, taking things worth $30,000, including Kaylee's ashes, which Kaylee's parents placed in a small necklace. The criminals have been caught. They pleaded guilty to 16 property crimes and were sentenced to 40 months in prison. One of the criminals confessed that he threw the necklace with Kaylee's ashes in the trash, and, unfortunately, it was never found. Kaylee's legacy also stays strong through Kaylee's Law, which was passed in 2019. Kaylee's Law requires campus security and their vehicles to be clearly distinguishable from actual law enforcement. The vehicles cannot have rooftop lights or a divider known as a cage between the front and back seats. They must have a GPS and an interior video camera that records whenever someone gets inside. campus officers are also now prohibited from making vehicle stops or stopping and frisking individuals. National background checks and psychological testing are also required before a security officer is hired. This story is probably the most high-profile investigation in Hawaiian history. On that fateful Christmas Eve, a young woman set out on what seemed like an ordinary bike ride through the serene landscapes of Hawaii. Little did she know, this journey would end in a horrifying tragedy that would grip the island for decades. Her mangled bicycle, shoes, and clumps of hair, found abandoned on the side of the road, provided the first chilling clue. The mystery deepened as evidence of a brutal assault emerged, revealing a crime far more sinister than a mere accident. Dana Ireland was born on December 12, 1968, in Fort Belvoir, Fairfax County, Virginia, USA. She was the youngest daughter in the family of John Ireland and Mary Louise Crank. Her sister, Sandra, was 7 years older than her. In 1991, when Dana was 23 years old, she and her parents were visiting her sister, who lived in Hawaii. On December 24 in the afternoon, she took her sister's bike for a ride. Later, people found her bike, shoe, and clump of hair next to the side of the road, but Dana herself was not there. From the bike's appearance, it was clear that Dana got hit by a car. The impact was so strong that it deformed both wheels, and the steering wheel and the seat came off altogether. Unfortunately, the hope that the man who hit Dana took her to the hospital instead of leaving her to die was false. The reality turned out to be much scarier than anyone could have imagined. Dana was found 5 miles from where they found her bike. She had severe injuries on her body and head and was naked from the waist down. Hence, one can conclude that someone didn't just hit her with a car. Someone also took advantage of her weakness. Nurse Jerry Gallagher recalls the incident and says the nightmares haunt her to the point of exhaustion. She can't escape the memory of Christmas Eve 1991 at a spot on a seaside fishing trail in Wawa, where she was led to Dana Ireland. Gallagher lived with her husband Randy on Satellite Road, a rough, unpaved road cutting into the coastal jungle 25 miles by road southeast of Hilo. At 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve 1991, a friend named Brian, a registered nurse, knocked on their door. He wore a Christmas hat with blinking lights, but his mood was far from festive. He drove her to where Dana was lying, a mile from Gallagher's house. Dana was naked from the waist down, and the inner side of her legs was full of bruises. Gallagher remembers trying to help the injured young woman using a first aid kit. She bandaged her wounds. The most severe injury was on the back of her head. She asked the woman her name. "Ireland," she seemed to say. Gallagher asked who attacked her, but Dana wasn't coherent. "Please give me the keys so I can drive home," Ireland said. Gallagher tried to keep her awake. An ambulance arrived more than 2 hours after the girl got hit by a car. The lack of phones in the area led to a significant delay in getting help. The medical staff of the police and fire departments were busy with other cases. However, their own mistakes also led to a 34-minute delay. The dispatcher who received the call about the injured young woman gave the wrong address of where they found Dana, which caused a loss of valuable time. "I thought 1,000,000 times about taking her down to the hospital in my car, but I was so concerned about paralyzing her," Gallagher says. "I've had nightmares about it. None of us knew that it was going to take so long. It took an indescribably long time to get help down to her. If they had got help to her, she would have lived." An ambulance with Dana Ireland inside arrived at Hilo Hospital at 7:56 p.m. At this time, John and Mary Ireland were already looking for their daughter, whose disfigured bicycle lay by the side of the road. They heard the news about an injured woman found 5 miles away. However, they didn't know that this woman was Dana. "We thought someone had hit her and taken her to the hospital," Mary recalled later. John told Mary and his eldest daughter Sandra to go to the hospital while he stayed near Dana's bike. When the ambulance brought Dana to the hospital, her mother and older sister were already there. Doctors fought for Dana's life for 4.5 hours, but unfortunately, they could not save her. She was pronounced dead at 12:25 a.m. The official cause of death was blood loss due to extensive traumatic injuries of the head, pelvis, and abdomen caused by a motor vehicle accident. Dana's family went home and heard the radio the following morning. They thought some car hit their daughter, but the radio said Dana's death wasn't accidental. When John spoke to a local police representative, he was told nothing about the fact that not only had Dana been hit by a car, but that someone had taken advantage of her vulnerability afterward. Dana's death came as a shock to her family. Her death irreversibly changed their lives. However, They would later realize another challenge awaited them. Many years of searching for suspects and trials, the police launched an investigation, which the local newspapers described as intense. The police found a t-shirt that belonged to the criminal at the crime scene. Next, investigators seized as evidence a sheet with traces of semen on which Dana was lying when brought to the hospital. Seminal fluid was also on Dana's body. Moreover, a bite mark on her body was a potential clue, since it looked like the teeth prints of the person who attacked her. As a result, the authorities had a DNA sample of the criminal at their disposal, but it was 1991. It wasn't of much help to the investigation process. Another potential clue was the tire tracks where they found Dana's bike. Investigators interviewed residents, hoping to find witnesses who saw Dana getting hit by a car, but no one saw this moment. Or perhaps, for some reason, they remained silent. The place where the bike was found, and the place where Dana was found, was not a densely populated area, but instead was a secluded place with a bad road where cars didn't travel very often. Due to the lack of witnesses and evidence to help find the criminal, the investigation has reached a dead end. Anyone with information about the case would have received a reward, the amount of which grew over time. However, there was no breakthrough in the case. Later, in May 1994, John Gonsalves contacted the Hawaii County Police. Gonsalves was involved in a high-profile case involving illegal substances, but even though he was facing several decades in prison, he got off with a suspended sentence. The reason for such mitigation was that he told the police that his half-brother, Frank Pauline, had important information about the Dana Ireland case. Pauline said that brothers Albert Ian Schweitzer and Sean Schweitzer were involved in the attack on Dana. The Schweitzer family lived next door to the Pauline family, and the two did not get along with one another. Frank Pauline claimed he was there when the Schweitzers attacked Dana. They ran over Dana Ireland, put her in the trunk, and took her to another place, he told the police. Hence, the police made Albert Schweitzer, Sean Schweitzer, and Frank Pauline the main suspects after the latter's statements. Frank Pauline Jr. was born on April 27, 1973, in Fremont, California, in the family of Frank Sr. and Patricia Pauline. The older he got, the more serious the crimes he committed became. In February 1994, a little over 2 years after Dana's death, he was sentenced to 10 years for harassment and robbery. These charges were not related to Dana Ireland, and yet it made it clear that Frank Pauline won't stop his criminal activities. Due to the crime's multitude, prosecutors dubbed him a walking crime wave at the sentencing hearing. After the hearing, Pauline lived up to his new nickname. Classified as a fugitive, he was recaptured in Honolulu a few days later. 3 months after Pauline received a 10-year sentence, his brother John Gonsalves contacted the authorities and told them that Frank had information about the Dana Ireland case. Pauline and Gonsalves decided that providing information on the Ireland case would help the first one not to go to prison and the second to get out of it earlier. Of course, the stepbrothers were doubtful sources of information, and yet, after a conversation with investigators, the case against John Gonsalves for illegal substances was closed. In the end, he received only a suspended sentence. After Pauline stated he had information about the Dana Ireland case, investigators from Big Island went to talk with Pauline in Honolulu, where the latter was in custody. It was a 90-minute interrogation during which they asked him to tell the details about the day of the attack on Dana, since he claimed to be present during the attack. They took him back to the Big Island, where he reconstructed the crime and showed detectives the places he mentioned earlier. Pauline told detectives that brothers Albert Ian and Sean Schweitzers picked him up in a purple Volkswagen Beetle at his home on December 24, 1991. As he said, Ian Schweitzer was behind the wheel. The trio stopped to take illegal substances before they saw a woman standing on the side of the road. We came out by an intersection going towards Kapaho, and that's where we saw a girl standing up. As we were going past, my friend Ian looked towards the side and he said, "Oh, look at that girl." Then we continued to go forward down the road, Pauline said. They turned around because Ian wanted to talk to the woman. They were driving back at about 40 miles per hour, and Ian Schweitzer, who was behind the wheel, did not stop in time and hit Dana Ireland. According to him, the Schweitzers got out of the car, loaded it into the trunk, and continued driving. After a few miles, they stopped and pulled Dana out of the vehicle. She was still alive. Pauline stated that unlike the Schweitzer brothers, he did not become intimate with the victim, and yet, he still said something that brought severe consequences. He said that Ian Schweitzer insisted that he find a tire iron and hit the victim on the head to end her suffering. After that, allegedly, they got back into the car and drove away. All his testimony was on paper, and Pauline signed a statement stating that he testified of his own free will. No one forced him or promised anything, and he was not under the influence of illegal substances or alcohol. After Pauline started cooperating with the police, he was transferred to the Maui Community Correctional Center for his protection. As prison officials said, he was a problem for management and received threats from other inmates. In July 1996, just over 2 years after Gonzalez gave his statement to the police, Frank Pauline retracted his story, saying he made it up because his stepbrother asked him to help him avoid jail. He said he wasn't present at the time of the attack, but still had information about who was responsible for it. According to him, he confessed he was there only because it was the only way to make them believe him. And my brother telling me the worst thing that can happen to you is they go and give you perjury, Pauline said. However, perjury wasn't among the crimes they accused him of. On July 30, 1997, he was charged with taking the life of Dana Ireland as he signed a confession stating that he hit her on the head with a tire iron. Later that year, the Schweitzer brothers also received charges. They denied their involvement in the case, stating they had been with their family on December 24, 1991. It is worth mentioning that the police had reason to believe that Pauline lied when he said he participated in the crime with the Schweitzer brothers. After all, when investigators took him to the Big Island, he could show neither the exact place where they hit Dana, nor where people later found her. And yet, Pauline signed the confession, which resulted in charges against him. Realizing that his stepbrother was wrong, saying that perjury was the only thing he could get accused of, he retracted his confession. Meanwhile, Gonzalez adhered to the script. Hence, the police dropped the main charges of illegal substance conspiracy against him. He testified against his half-brother Frank Pauline at the trial. At that time, DNA testing technology was not as advanced as it is now. Shortly after the arrest, the authorities collected DNA samples of Pauline and the Schweitzer brothers. The Hawaii County Prosecutor's Office also checked biological fluids from the gurney sheet used the day they took Dana Ireland to the hospital and swabs from her body. However, the police were startled when they received a report saying that the DNA of Frank Pauline and the Schweitzer brothers did not match the DNA of the criminal. Based on these results, they dropped the charges against these 3 men, and yet it didn't prevent the investigation from continuing their prosecution. They just stated that someone else must be involved in this. Besides, other evidence also didn't point to these 3 men. The teeth prints of the Schweitzer brothers and Pauline did not match what investigators believe was a bite mark on the victim's chest. The police found no traces of Dana Ireland's blood or hair in Albert Ian Schweitzer's Volkswagen, a car that became his property only a month after her death. Perhaps pressure from the Ireland family, the public, and the press played a role in the further development of events. Albert Ian Schweitzer was 20 years old at the time of Dana Ireland's death. The only thing he had on his criminal record was related to traffic violations, such as resisting an order to pull over and racing on the roadway. Sean Schweitzer was 16 years old when Dana died. When the brothers received charges related to the Ireland case, Sean was already 23 years old. At that time, the police also charged him with 4th-degree assault in an unrelated case, namely inappropriately touching a girl. For the latter case, he received a sentence of 180 days in prison and 1 year of probation. At the time of the incident, the girl was 15 and Sean was 16. Thus, although the DNA test was negative, all 3 suspects involved in Dana Ireland's death violated the law at some point. It, of course, didn't help to clear their names. Despite all that, the prosecutors continued to move forward. On May 5, 1999, a few days before the statute of limitations on some crimes committed against Dana Ireland, the police received what they thought was another breakthrough in the case. They received a statement from a prisoner named Michael Ortiz. Being an accomplice of Gonzalez, he was in the same cell with the Schweitzers before the police dropped charges against them. In conversations with the authorities, Ortiz claimed that Albert Ian Schweitzer confessed to him what he had done. Based on Ortiz's testimony, just 2 weeks later, Frank Pauline and the Schweitzer brothers were again charged in the Dana Ireland case. After this, some people had suspicions and distrust of the authorities. After all, they received information from a questionable source just a few days before the statute of limitations ran out. It seemed too convenient. Frank Pauline was the first to appear in court. The trial was very emotional. Pauline insisted on his innocence, telling the court that he had lied when he confessed his involvement in Dana's death. On the witness stand, Mary Ireland recalled getting that first call about what had happened to her daughter. "She said something awful has happened," she said. "There's a bicycle in the road, a shoe, and hair," Ireland recounted. But the witnesses who linked Pauline to the crime had questionable backgrounds, and some had a lot to gain by pointing the finger. Among those who benefited from Pauline being found guilty was his half-brother Gonsalves, who became a witness for the prosecution. Witness William Chung, who also testified against Pauline, said Frank confessed his involvement in this crime. However, when asked if he saw Pauline in the courtroom, he pointed to another person, although Frank Pauline was there. The jury also saw Dana Ireland's bike shorts, top, underwear, and a Jimmy's t-shirt recovered from the scene. Not one of those items had DNA from Pauline or the Schweitzers. To get around the lack of scientific evidence, Deputy Prosecutor Lincoln Ashita insisted that the Jimmy's t-shirt, covered in Dana Ireland's blood, belonged to Pauline. "We're not afraid of that evidence. We embrace it," Ashita said. That same DNA technology works both ways for the defense and the prosecution. Pauline's lawyer protested, saying the t-shirt wasn't even Frank's size. Nevertheless, the jury found that the evidence and assumptions presented at the trial were enough to convict Pauline. Despite forensic evidence showing that Pauline gave a false confession, he was found guilty and sentenced to 180 years. The next was the trial of Albert Ian Schweitzer. He knew that despite the lack of any physical evidence, Frank Pauline had been sentenced to 180 years in prison. Therefore, Schweitzer was surprised when prosecutors offered him to take a plea deal. However, he refused it, continuing to insist on his innocence. The prosecutor claimed that Schweitzer's Volkswagen Beetle was the car that hit Dana and then took her to a fishing trail where she was found. All this happened despite several facts. Firstly, in the area where they found Dana, witnesses saw another car, a pickup truck. Secondly, analysis of Schweitzer's car did not show any evidence of his involvement in this case, and Ian became the official owner of the Volkswagen only in January 1992. In 2000, based on the statement of Michael Ortiz, who claimed he heard Schweitzer's confession and the allegedly unusual circumstance of scratches on the bumper of his car, Ian Schweitzer was sentenced to 130 years in prison. After seeing his older brother convicted, Sean Schweitzer took a plea deal. He and his family changed their minds and decided not to insist on his innocence, fearing the justice system would fail them again. In the end, Sean Schweitzer pleaded guilty to the lesser charges of kidnapping and involuntary deprivation of life. Part of the deal with the prosecutor's office was that Sean Schweitzer had to accuse his brother and Frank Pauline of Dana's death and take a polygraph test to show he was honest when confessing to the crime and reporting the details. On March 24, 2000, a polygraph examiner from the State Attorney General's office administered the test. As the court documents indicated, when taking the test, Sean Schweitzer wasn't truthful when describing what happened. In other words, he lied about his involvement in the death of Dana Ireland. However, while he didn't pass the test, he still received an offer to take the plea deal, and here's why. Deputy Prosecutor Lincoln Ashita gave the judge a different statement. According to court transcripts, Ashita said Schweitzer did pass the polygraph, finding that he was not deceptive to any of the questions. Sean Schweitzer was sentenced to 5 years probation, with credit for time served, 18 months. In an interview Sean gave to Hawaii News Now after his release, he said the deal with the prosecutor's office was a family decision. His brother Ian, the one sentenced to 130 years, later recalled how he thought it was pointless to imprison both brothers. Ian said losing both sons would be even more stressful for his parents, and they would not survive it. He approved the family's decision and told Sean to do what the prosecutor said to avoid spending the rest of his life in prison. Sean still feels remorseful for making the deal and testifying against his brother. And as the months and years passed, he and his family also struggled with the stain left by this case. "I went through many years of disappointment, had a hard time finding a job," Sean Schweitzer said, adding that community members made remarks about the case for years. Dana's father, John, died in 2007. After the death of his daughter, he became an advocate for the rights of crime victims. He also worked on the adoption of a law concerning the statute of limitations for violent crimes. Ian Schweitzer and his family did not accept his wrongful conviction and continued to fight. In 2005, Ian Schweitzer applied for a case review from the Innocence Project. 5 years later, in 2010, work on this project started gaining momentum. Law students at the University of Hawaii, lawyers, and professors studied old documents related to the investigation of the Dana Ireland case. The prosecutors of Hawaii County let them do their job. They allowed the Innocence Project to review the case to determine if the wrong people were convicted. His legal team presented new evidence to the court. DNA expert Nancy Din was one of those who testified at the trial. They tested all the items again using advanced methods unavailable during the original trials. The technology got better, Din explained, It got improved in a sense that we can now see things that we could not see before. In 2000, authorities said there was too much Dana Ireland's blood on the t-shirt, stating it as a reason that they did not find any DNA of Frank Pauline or the Schweitzer brothers on it. However, scientists who studied the evidence of the Innocence Project distinguished Dana Ireland's DNA from other DNA found on the t-shirt using modern technology. They also found seminal fluid and sweat from the armpit on it. DNA expert Nancy Dinh testified that the DNA found on the t-shirt and Dana's body belonged to the same person. But this person was neither Frank Pauline nor one of the Schweitzer brothers. After Dinh's statement, a tire tread expert gave remote testimony, telling the court that Schweitzer's Volkswagen could not have left tracks found at both crime scenes. In his opinion, a larger vehicle, a truck, SUV, or van left those tracks. Dentist Adam Freeman was the last to testify. On April 27, 2015, an inmate, Daniel Hood, who was serving time for taking the lives of 2 people, attacked Frank Pauline, hitting him 3 times on the back of the head with a rock when they were all in the recreation yard at the Southern New Mexico Correctional Facility in Las Cruces. They were cellmates. Hood attacked Pauline because he considered him a snitch. The medical staff of the prison could not save Pauline. 3 decades later, the Dana Ireland case remains open, and the investigators hope that new methods of DNA testing and genealogy will allow them to find the person who destroyed the life of the Ireland family. Thanks for watching. It would be great if you support the video by giving it a like. Subscribe to the channel. There are many shocking stories ahead.